Welcome. So glad you've tuned into another one of our student ministry lessons. This week, we are going to be in week two of our Mission Possible series. And so, as we start today, I want to take a trip down memory lane to back in school when we used to do show and tell. That was always one of my favorite days. Just getting to see all the really neat things that people had, what they cared about. And it was even awesome when people, they bring in their pets. Like, that was my favorite part. But when we think about show and tell, if someone came in and, they're just telling you all about their favorite thing, but they don't have it with them, right? They're not showing anything. They're just standing there talking about it. That's less exciting, right? Like, it's very hard to buy into to why they care about it, to why they're interested in it, why it means so much to them. And you know what? That actually applies to the gospel as well, right? And how we're sharing it. If we're just telling people about it, it's not going to mean as much to them if we're not showing it. So that's what we're going to talk about today: is how we can show people the gospel and the good news of Jesus. So last week we started this series all about the mission that Jesus gave us to tell the whole world about His death, His life, and His resurrection. And it's a big mission, but it's not impossible. But we have a problem. And we talked about this last week about how one of the most common words that people use to describe Christians is hypocritical. And that means a lot of people have encountered Christians whose lives don't match up with their words. And so, we could let that discourage us, or we could see it as a reminder that our mission is honestly kind of like show and tell. We can't just tell people what we believe; we have to show it with our actions. Before we go any further, I just kind of want to recap what our mission is. As Jesus says in Matthew 28:18 through 20, just go and make disciples, right? Like, that's our mission. If we know Jesus, it's to go share the good news of His life, His death, and His resurrection with others. We need to tell people about Jesus, who He is, how He died for us, and make disciples. Now, and with that, have you heard the word evangelism before? And that's kind of a word that we say around church, and it's a word that we use to talk about how we, as Jesus followers, carry out our mission. Do you know what? That word's actually not in the Bible. You're not going to find it in there. But it does come from a Greek word that you'll find in the Bible. It's called euangelion. And it's a word that's often used to talk about delivering a message of good news. And that's our role, right? Is we are messengers carrying the good news of Jesus. But unfortunately, many people they would say, they think evangelism, and it kind of has a bad reputation. When some people hear that word, they think of Christians who are pushy and rude and judgmental, maybe even harsh. And that could be because some people, they just simply don't want to hear the message of Jesus. But also, it could be because some Jesus followers have tried to tell others about the love of Jesus without showing the love of Jesus through their lives, their actions, and their relationships. And that's going to be a message that I repeat quite a few times through this lesson about our lives, our actions, and our relationships, because those are the three things that we need to show the love of Jesus through. So before Jesus gave us the Great Commission, which is what we read a minute ago, which is make disciples, right? And Jesus sent 72 of the disciples that He was around out on another mission first. And we're going to actually take a look at what Jesus said at the beginning of that mission, because there's something important that we can learn from what Jesus has to say. So we're going to be looking in Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 1. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of Him, two by two, into every town and place where He Himself was about to go. And He said to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into His harvest. Go your way. Behold, I am sending you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. Carry no money bag, no knapsack, no sandals, and greet no one on the road. Whatever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him. But if not, it will return to you. and remain in the same house, eating and drinking what they provide, for the laborer deserves his wages. Do not go from house to house. Whenever you enter a town and they receive you, eat what is set before you. Heal the sick in it, and say to them, the kingdom of God has come near to you. Now, there's a lot in that passage that I think is cultural, and Jesus kind of uses an illustration at the beginning. So, Jesus' message is kind of indicating that this is an urgent mission that we're on, right? Like he said, don't talk to anyone on the road. So it's quick. He says, get to the town and talk to the people. Now, what's really interesting though is Jesus is really focused on the disciples' actions. Right? If he's sending them out on a mission, we would almost expect him to just kind of word for word give them a sermon that they were supposed to say or what they were supposed to tell the people. But instead, he focuses on their actions. He says that they are supposed to stay in people's homes, that they're supposed to build relationships, share meals with them, accept their hospitality, heal the sick, all these things that are demonstrating the love of God, and not so much the telling part. And so Jesus didn't say, go into these communities, immediately preach to them about the kingdom of God, and then leave. Right? He wanted his followers to build these relationships and learn how to serve others, maybe even before they shared the good news with their words. And so preaching the good news was important. That was, just part of their mission. Jesus sent his disciples to tell about him, but he also wanted them to spend time with the communities that they were teaching, so they could show the good news of Jesus with their actions too. And so, years after Jesus' resurrection, a man named Paul, he actually became one of the greatest missionaries of all time. We talk about Paul and all of his missionary journeys and his teachings often in our lessons. And so, on one missionary journey that's recorded in the book of Acts, chapter 14, Paul and his partner Barnabas were on a missionary journey, and they went to a couple cities, Iconium and Lystra. Now, these cities were part of the Greek culture, so they believed in lots of gods, and they weren't always receptive to Paul's message about how Jesus was the son of the one true God, and that he died for sins. The message of the gospel, they weren't always very receptive to that. But in Lystra, in Acts chapter 14, it records what Paul and Barnabas did. When they went into the city, they realized that the people were only going to listen if they, saw a demonstration of the gospel, of the good news. And so the people actually began to listen to the message of Paul and Barnabas after they saw them heal a man who couldn't walk. And so, just like the 72 disciples in Luke 10, Paul and Barnabas knew that sharing the good news of Jesus, it wasn't just about words, it was about showing and telling. Right? Like they had to show people what the love of God looks like, often before they could even tell them. Because, it's hard for people to be receptive to the message of Jesus when they really don't know what following Jesus looks like or what Jesus' love looks like. And so, we read about the apostles and disciples doing this, but how do we show people the gospel instead of just telling them? Well, there's something that I notice, kind of a common theme in these stories, is that whenever or wherever they went, the disciples, they brought value to other people. The words that they spoke brought value to people, like they had a message of hope and a message of peace and help. They were willing to help the people, like that's the message of Jesus. Their actions brought value to others, and their relationships that they built. They built relationships with people who were kind of outcasts, and so that they didn't feel a whole lot of value in their lives. But the disciples, through their actions, gave these people value, and these relationships helped them understand how that they could help these people and better understand them. And so, here's another consequence of bringing value to others. When we bring value to them, we earn trust and influence with them. If we think about the people who, we trust and the people we are influenced by, chances are those people have helped us in some way or added value to our lives. In both of the passages in the Bible we looked at, the followers of Jesus understood that. That when it comes to sharing the gospel, sometimes we need to earn the right to be heard. Like we can't just go in proclaiming the message of Jesus because the people we're talking to, they just don't want to listen at first. So, if we're going to go on this, not so secret mission of Jesus, well, one of the things that's going to help us is that instead of expecting others to listen to what we have to say, we have to try to earn the right to be heard by bringing value to others through our words, our actions, and our relationships. If we're on this mission that Jesus has sent us, we can't just talk. Right? Like we have to be helpful too. When we add value to other people's lives through our words, our actions, and our relationships, we're going to begin to earn the right to be heard. And now we might think that ministry is just for adults or pastors. I think that's a tendency that we might have is that ministry is only for certain people. But we're actually all called to be ministers, to the people around us. It's part of our mission. It's part of making disciples. So there's a guy, a pastor and an author. His name is Francis Chan. And in his book Multiply, he wrote this. It says, ministry sounds intimidating until you develop a realistic view of what ministry is really about. Do you know people who struggle with sin? Do you know people who are carrying burdens? If so, then your first steps toward ministry are easy to help them. And I think that makes it a bit easier and puts it into perspective for us what ministry is all about. It starts with just helping people. And one of the reasons that we sometimes avoid participating in God's mission is that we're afraid no one will listen. Maybe for you, you're like, I can hardly even get the dog to listen. So, how am I supposed to get people to hear this message that I have about Jesus? Well, I think showing the gospel with our actions helps us earn the right to be heard when we have an opportunity to tell someone about what Jesus means to us. It's just like show and tell. When we show someone who Jesus is and why his message means so much to us, we have an opportunity to tell them about it as well. And so that happens after we add value to their lives by helping them. Our influence is going to grow. If we only tell people about Jesus without showing them his love with our words, our actions, our influence is not going to be really great with them. But when we add value to their lives by being helpful, our influence is going to grow. People need to hear the message that we have. The world needs us to show people the good news of Jesus and not just tell them about it. The world needs the love of God to be displayed through our actions. So if we want to join Jesus on this mission of making disciples, we have to start here by being helpful with our words, our actions, in our relationships. And then we can watch what God is going to do with our growing influence. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you can tune in next week to week 3 of our series.